one of the key features of PlayStation 5 Professional is the fact that your existing PlayStation 5 games should, in theory, run better thanks to the Game Boost feature. So I had the pleasure of testing Game Boost, which we can now confirm deploys the full power, or something close to it, of the PlayStation 5 Pro to non-Pro games. They run faster, and we all know which game we had to test first, Elden Ring. I'm using the quality mode here, which runs at a fixed 4K with fixed quality settings. Both of those elements are kind of dynamic in the performance mode, but we'll get onto that shortly. Quality mode. So this is good for like comparisons to get some sort of grip on the performance differential. So here's the thing. You won't get a locked 60 frames per second on PlayStation 5 in PlayStation 5 Pro, rather, in quality mode. But you should comfortably remain within the 48 to 60 FPS VRR window for most play. Looking at the comparisons here, I've added real-time performance differentials expressed as percentages. But when the game does run at 60, obviously the GPU is underutilized, so the percentage will be lower. It's in areas of gameplay where the Pro is under 60 that you should see how much extra performance the Pro gives. Seems to max out at around 35%, a typical 30 to 35% delta. So yeah, not a locked 60 in quality mode. However, then I tested the frame rate mode, dynamic resolution, dynamic features. It should be locked to 60 easily, but it's not. So I'm guessing possibly the game's DRS system doesn't quite know what to do with the horsepower. There's also the possibility that we're CPU limited in some respect. Even so, VRR will smooth this out. So the Pro, still the best place to play on consoles, even if it's not everything we want it to be. You gave this a go, didn't you, John?
Yeah, because this is a game that I played through on Xbox Series X. That was previously the best place to play it because of the wider VRR window, but obviously it regularly falls into the 40s. The PS5 Pro essentially solves that completely. As you say, performance mode in my testing was able to stay well in the VRR range pretty much all the time. So it's very smooth, and that's the mode I use on Xbox. And that PS5 also gets per object motion blur, which looks really good, which the Xbox version doesn't seem to use in that mode for some reason. And then what surprised me was that the quality mode is actually very usable now, and that runs better than performance mode on Xbox. And you
Right.
get it now mostly stays in the VRR window, not 100% as your values show, but it's close, and it's usually in the 50s, and it's a noticeable boost in sort of like clarity, and it's still fluid. So I thought that was a huge improvement in my experience, and I kind of want to dig back into it because I did not play the DLC yet. But that means I
Right.
gotta kind
Okay.
of start over and play through on PS5. I bought a physical copy in Japan and gonna go through it. So let's do it.
Cool. I also did some tests against the PC version at quality mode settings equivalents, basically, or as close as we could get to it, up against the PS5 and the PS5 Pro. So fixed 4K there, fixed settings. I'm using an RX 6800 here, as many believe it offers pro level performance. The thing is, though, the 6800, there are PC style stutters throughout, but in terms of actual gameplay, it's way, way, way smoother. So I'm going to be interested to do more sort of quality comparisons, performance comparisons between various PC parts and the Pro based on real world performance. Right now, all of the sort of conjecture about the performance of the PlayStation 5 Pro has been based on Sony's statement that it's 45% faster, but certainly Game Boost, it rarely gets there. I was also curious about ray tracing support on the Pro and whether Game Boost taps into the extra features because the Pro has extra RT features, right? I was curious if the backwards compatibility would kick in with those features, similar to the way it does on a PC, but I don't think it does. So I'm using control in photo mode here, which unlocks frame rate, and of course, we have returned to the corridor of doom. The first comparison seems to offer a performance boost in the region of about 31%, kind of similar to the Elden Ring boosts. The following scene, again from the Corridor of Doom, 32, 33% boost overall. Also did a couple of scenes outside the corridor, which are lighter. The Pro can run faster. Still similar differentials overall, 33%. So back compat can't tie into the extra RT features of the Pro as far as I know. It just taps into the raw performance. Yeah, so that's quite interesting. I mean, it's great, but it has its limitations. But I think there's genuine application in the 120 hertz mode. Devil May Cry here, special edition. You can unlock the game to run in 120 hertz mode. I'm using, first of all, graphics mode with ray tracing, which essentially removes the 60 FPS limit, so we always have that differential there. I tried the intro in graphics mode. Very similar performance increases overall, but there are some instances where it does seem to go higher than that 35% threshold. Maybe it's the sampling rate on my performance comparisons there, which is higher in 120 hertz mode, but who knows. In performance mode, though, still with RT enabled, the differentials can go higher. But I think the key point here really is that with VRR performance RT mode, you're just getting a better high frame rate gameplay experience. I think you'd agree with that, right, John?
Absolutely, yeah. I think this is really important too, because this is one of those weird games that never received a PC update, right? It's only Devil May Cry 5 Standard Edition on PC without the ray tracing. And because of the performance demands of this game, DMC5 SE was never really possible to really enjoy the ray tracing mode, I felt. You had to settle for not a great frame rate if you wanted decent looking ray tracing. Finally, it feels like it runs the way you would expect. And I found the quality mode with ray tracing in VR to be absolutely excellent as a result. It stays pretty much above 60 by and large, and it just feels responsive and it looks great. And it's kind of become like the best looking way to play DMC5 now, which, by the way, it's still a stunning looking game.
Oliver, do you have any thoughts on Game Boost? Did you give it a go?
I did give Game Boost a go, and the first protocol for me was Metaphor Refantazio, because that game kind of infamously does not run at anything like a stable frame rate on PlayStation 5 consoles, on Xbox Series consoles, basically on anything almost. It runs at 1656p and it's like 40 to 60 FPS-ish on PS5. It's not a good experience. Totally like unlocked frame rate. It also has a 120 hertz mode, which again does not work well because the game dips even below the VRR window on PlayStation 5 quite frequently. I speculated in my video last month that PS5 Pro would basically fix it, and lo and behold, it has. It's basically a locked 60 FPS now. It's a very smooth experience, even in areas where the base console was really struggling. In spots, at the worst I saw was in a spot where the base console is like 44 FPS, 43 FPS. PS5 Pro was like 55, 56, 57. And that's like a pretty extreme scenario. So even without VRR, this game is totally saved. Great experience. And this is like probably the most challenged recent release I've seen on the consoles in terms of hitting a consistent frame rate. And it is obviously a very popular game now. Lots of people are playing it. And I think it's just about perfect now on PS5 Pro. So if you get the most powerful console in the world, you can have a game that looks about 10 years out of date running at a stable 60 FPS on a console. If you spend $700 on a console, that's pretty extraordinary. I also tried out a couple other games. One other game I tried out was FF16, which ran unlocked in its performance mode most of the time, much of the time, except in combat. John covered that, obviously. Weird behavior there. I did not play too much, but Pro unfortunately does not deliver a locked 60 FPS. It's like in the 50s a lot. I think there, what might be happening is the dynamic res is just kicking in and it's not load balancing in a way that we would like, probably, because it does have a dynamic resolution system. So it's kind of like there are some positives here, big positives with the boost potentially. And it does apply, by the way, to all games. There's no way to turn it off. It's just always using the whole GPU. That's important to note. There's no like PS4 Pro style game enhancement might break your games. In this case, they're just applying it to all games, it seems like. I think that even though it isn't like a gigantic improvement in some titles, because of dynamic res, because of VRR and lots of titles with unlocked modes, because of the occasional odd title like Metaphor Refantazio that's just like running in a slightly messed up manner, I think that there are probably a lot of examples here, and we're probably just scratching the surface a little bit of what can be done with this. But Yeah, I think there are a lot of games probably that will get decent enhancements from Game Boost, and that will really help people with like big libraries play older
Yeah.
titles. That especially they might have VRR modes. You know, those unlocked VRR modes in lots of games. They don't run so well necessarily on base PS5. Maybe they'll run quite a bit better on PS5 Pro.
I have a few more to chime in as well here, very briefly. Silent Hill 2 benefits that may receive a patch. Actually, I'm not sure, but that essentially eliminates the stuttering issues that I noticed. It smooths out both performance and quality mode. So performance mode is now mostly 60 with a couple of little dips here and there, but VRR smooths that out. But it's very close. The 30 FPS mode on base PS4 actually had a lot of slowdown, which was extremely shocking. Anytime you would be attacked by certain enemies, and that is also eliminated, as well as the running around stutters that it suffered from. It's just a lot more consistent. Silent Hill, the short message, that little hexadrive free Silent Hill experience, also fixed now, runs at 60 FPS properly, whereas before it was extremely unstable. So that's a huge improvement there. Suicide Squad I randomly tested, and I didn't spend too much time with it, but it seemed to, those sort of skips and stutters and dips that I saw in the city have largely been cleaned up, but maybe they're also cleaned up on the base system, but it definitely felt better in my experience. Then there's three others to quickly mention. Ghostwire Tokyo, it gets much closer, but not locked to by any means the 120 hertz output. So you can play that game in 120 hertz mode, and it actually allows the frame rate to be uncapped. And in the quality mode now, you're getting mostly north of 60. And the performance mode is north of 100, I believe. So it is noticeably smoother, which is interesting. But it still has some weird little like hiccups and stutters, which the game has always suffered from. So it did not fully fix it, but it is smoother. Armored Core 6 as well. This was a From Software joint. It ran better than Elden Ring ever did, but it still had dips on actual... on the regular PS5. It's cleaned up in my experience. That was my game of the year when it came out last year, I guess. And it's freaking awesome. And now it's actually quite a bit better on PS5. Lastly, GT7's patch hasn't launched yet, and I decided to try it out. And what was interesting about this now is you can run it at native 4K mode in the 120 hertz mode, and now it achieves a completely locked 120 FPS playback in native 4K mode, which previously it was in like the 80 to 90 FPS range with the uncapped VRR mode. Now it's just flat 120. You also get 120 FPS replays, which Excellent. There can be tiny little dips here and there, but like I've never seen replays this smooth in GT before. So it's quite a treat. And weirdly, I would assume that these options might go away once it's patched. So right. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
I think my sort of final takeaway is that you do seem to be getting the full power of the PlayStation 5 Professional deployed on older games. But that does raise the question of the 45% extra raster performance, because I don't think you're getting that level. Question is whether that applies to pro level games or whether there's some restrictions in place that apply to Game Boost. So maybe you're not getting the full performance level. I think ultimately, if you look at your base PlayStation 5, increase the frame rate in GPU limited situations, we'll talk about CPU limited a bit later, then apply that 30% to the frame rate number you have, and that's pretty much what the Pro will give you. And if it gets you to 60, great, but it's not a given. Not every game is going to get to 60. But I'd say it's certainly a very, very interesting feature nonetheless. Something I didn't have time to test that much. You would expect games that are locked at a particular target performance level, 30 or 60, but are using dynamic resolution. You would expect the image quality to be cleaned up. I tried it on Metro Exodus, actually. I didn't actually see a massive difference there, but, mileage will vary on a title-to-title basis.